How's it going, Frosty friends? Since our last video, I've spent a lot of time doing some serious experimenting with Rampart. Shooting some plunkers. As you can see, very serious. So this video is going to be a character breakdown of how some of the recent changes to Rampart have made her more viable as a character, as well as some key use cases where her kit allows her to provide a lot of value to her team. You'll be seeing a lot more of my face in this video, so make sure to give me some feedback in the comments below, letting me know if you like seeing more of my face or if you don't. Just don't call me ugly, it'll hurt my feelings, okay? With all the boilerplate stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. And we're back. So Rampart as a character has traditionally not been the best of characters. Her cover only had 1 HP as it was getting stood up, which meant that it was really easy for enemies to shoot it out if you tried to stand up cover in the middle of the fight, and her minigun had practically no turning radius, in addition to all of the limitations that come with the minigun, like not being able to move and stuff like that. So the recent changes, I think, in this last patch, have moved Rampart up the Legends tier list. Her cover now has 45 HP, which means that the enemy has to now divert a noticeable amount of attention and bullets in order to prevent cover from Rampart going up in the middle of a fight. And her minigun now has a 180-degree turn radius, which is way more reasonable. She's actually able to hit stuff with it, and the minigun is actually an impactful ability now. I think some of the reasons why she really hasn't seen as much play and experimentation in spite of these changes, there's a new character Fuse, which everyone's, like wanting to experiment with. He's the new shiny thing. There's a huge surge in Octane's popularity because some changes to his abilities have greatly increased his viability, and also he's just more fun to play now. And Horizon, the second newest character, is still very popular, a very high impact character, and very viable also. And so I think a lot of players, are again gravitating towards like the newest thing. Her tactical ability allows her to place cover. These little walls, which you'll see in the following example, you get 3 charges with it, they fill over time, and they provide a one-way damage amp, which means that when the bullets pass through in the proper direction, they're going to do more damage to the enemy than if you hadn't had that cover there at all. And you can place a total of 5 of them, so Rampart really can like lock down a location. It's a lot of cover that you can place actually. And so one of the really important things to note about this cover is that it's perfect cover. It's the only instance of perfect cover within the game. What I mean by perfect cover is that you're able to see through it perfectly, like through the top half of her cover, and you're able to shoot through it without having to expose yourself, and the enemy can't shoot back. So again, it's like literally perfect because you are able to shoot at the enemy with 0 risk of any incoming damage. There's no other situation in the game that actually provides you with that benefit. Her ultimate ability is the minigun. It's stationary, has a 180-degree turn radius, it has a huge magazine and infinite reload ammo, and it's got a ridiculous rate of fire and DPS that none of the other weapons in the game even come close to. If you put one of these things down, you can be super annoying and basically nobody's gonna want to fight you. So it's like if I see, a Rampart turret like start spinning up and I see that little laser thing that like shows up like when she's like pointing it around and stuff, then I'm just gonna start figuring out how do I just fight her from a different direction or just avoid this person altogether, because this situation, like I'm not gonna get anything good done here. Her passive ability gives some buffs to the LMG weapon class, so it's going to increase the mag size as well as a significant decrease in the reload time. I think this is like sort of like a nice to have type thing, and it didn't get changed in the last patch, but I wouldn't really like pick Rampart specifically because like she has buffs to the LMGs. Let's go ahead and move on to the example, and you'll see some of these abilities in action. Well, all of them actually in action. In this example, you'll see that I place cover in front of the turret before engaging the enemies. And so this cover, right, is going to protect me since I'm not going to be able to move, and also gives me a damage amp as I fire through it, increasing even further, the effectiveness of the turret. This is one of those rare situations where the enemies are all distracted, and so I actually get to shoot at some of them with the turret since they're so busy fighting one another that they can't really take cover from me. As you'll notice, the turret itself is not super accurate to start, but the accuracy does increase over time. Throughout this entire fight, you can see I'm just being super annoying, and nobody is interested in staying in a line of fire for too long or directly engaging me because they know it's just going to be a losing damage exchange. Unfortunately, a good thing can only last for so long, and the enemies in this fight clearly get pretty fed up with me doing what I'm doing. So the enemy Octane has like a really great response to Rampart emplacements, which is throwing a grenade. I can't move if I stick on the turret, so I'm going to have to leave it anyways. Also, the cover gets shot out, and so it's like really clear that I'm taking a lot of attention and heat. And so in situations like these, right, like if you've placed a Rampart turret, like you need to be able to gauge like when it is time to leave. My teammates call out that we're also getting attacked from behind, and so at this point we're actually about to be sandwiched between enemies that are attacking us from behind and all of these squads that we've been fighting inside of Turbine. I respond, by setting up cover in anticipation of this upcoming fight. I use the cover to set up a base position, which you can see here, and then I go back and forth between the different sides of the fight to expand the control that we have incrementally. And so if I get take a lot of pressure while I'm placing these walls to expand our control, I just fall back to the base position. So I think in situations like where you're sort of like trying to control more space as Rampart, this is a really nice tactic that you can apply. The major weakness of Rampart gets laid bare when Fuse shows up, and there's a really important interaction between Fuse's tactical and Rampart cover, which is that Fuse's tactical instantly destroys the cover. Additionally, Rampart is just susceptible to grenades and airstrikes in general, which you see when Fuse throws his ult at us, since the whole idea is you stay behind our cover and don't move around, and grenades are specifically designed to punish you for not moving around. For these reasons, having a Watson on a squad with Rampart really helps out, and I think if you were playing ranked, it might be a consideration for another squad mate that you would want to have. Okay, so now that we've been through the basics of Rampart's abilities, let's look at our primary use case, which is going to be setting up to gatekeep or secure a busted endgame position inside the circle with zero integrity or soul or love for the game or whatever. I'm going to be completely honest, I don't like making play very much either, but it works. It's super basic conceptually, right? You just find a nice piece of high ground, maybe a building, and you just place a bunch of the cover and the minigun, and you just abuse the situation, right? And so if I'm if I see a Rampart emplacement like that, especially in ranked, and I'm trying to make a rotation past them, then I'm just gonna avoid it, right? It's like seeing a caustic set up inside of a building. It's if they're in your way, and there's no good reason to take that fight and there are alternative routes around them, then it's I'm just not gonna take that risk because it's just kind of pointless. So this strategy works best when Rampart is able to make an accurate prediction about where the enemy squads are going to be, and it takes a little bit of time for her to set up, and you want to be ready before the enemies start to get there and can shoot at your cover or shoot you as you're setting up the minigun or whatever, right? And so as you play the game more, you start to build sort of a bank of experience, so you'll have a better understanding of where are the good places to gatekeep people and how squads just tend to move around the map, and you'll also, have a better experience of endgame circles and sort of what the power positions there are, and you'll be able to make more accurate predictions of where the best spot to set up your Rampart cover is. And so I think once you reach a certain level of play, it's really not super unreasonable to expect somewhere between 1 or 2 situations where you're actually able to do this to squads. So this is an example of the strategy I just described, and is kind of an extreme case where we're actually able to play it all the way out to the end game. But you can see here, we have no souls. We've taken the high ground with a read on the endgame circle, and we're just sitting behind our cover, using sniper rifles, and completely abuse this first squad that we're fighting. They have no effective means for counterattack. They're held out of their effective range because we've got these snipers, and even if they attempted to try and poke to force us back behind the cover to stop peeking them, they can't really because there's perfect cover in front of them. And so this, should hopefully drive home the point. Do not fight ant snipers. Doesn't matter if you have a sniper too. It's you have to bust through that perfect cover that they have. So don't take that fight head on, right? Find a way around so that you can hopefully throw a grenade at them, find a different angle, or surprise them, or whatever. As we continue through this endgame segment, you'll notice that I try and shoot from a distance with the minigun because it's got infinite ammo, so I won't have to chew through my sniper ammo, but it's super inaccurate from these longer ranges. So I guess by example, you can see not the best way to try and use that ability. So eventually the second enemy squad that we're harassing gets third-partied, and they decide to commit on the other squad first, which I think is the right play and totally reasonable, because if they try to deal with us, it's going to take longer, and then the other enemy squad is just going to come and attack them from the backside. After dealing with the squad that's the other squad that's back there, this last squad tries to find a way to slip in. They're pretty proactive about shooting out our cover, but their rotations, I feel they kind of rush them and they wind up in a bad spot. So they had a horizon, so if they sit directly below our position, we can't shoot them, and they've got like all of like the initiative in terms of when they want to push up using that horizon queue, and it's just going to happen really quickly, before we can react. And so I really think that they should have just tried a little bit harder to try and be under us instead of trying to get into the ring like alongside us. I guess as a final note for this strategy, if it feels grimy when you're playing Rampart, it's probably working. And I genuinely regret filming this clip because I feel like I lost part of my soul as I did it. So now that we've covered the primary use case that you can expect out of a Rampart, let's cover some of the additional use cases that I've found as I experimented with her, in order of most frequently seen to least frequently seen. The first use case, that I found, you saw a little bit of it in the last example, is like locking down and shifting positions, as she establishes a zone of control. In chaotic situations, Rampart can establish control over space and then move or slowly place cover to expand or shift her zone of control, to fit the needs of her squads. In this example, you'll see that we hot drop, so there's lots of enemies here, very chaotic situation. The first piece of cover we place forces enemies to enter a climbing animation if they want to attack us, which creates an advantage for me in these early gunfights.
Okay, good.
This guy was so arrogant.
Right here. Okay, yeah, I might need a little bit of help. Just good.
The next piece of cover that we place cements our control over this room. So we're able to get a little bit more control in this chaotic situation, reset, and then figure out what we want to do next. So I personally don't like being a known quantity for too long in a fight, and so I want to shift our position. So you'll notice I remove the cover and then place new pieces of cover slightly more forward from our previous position. So what's important to notice here is that I removed that piece of cover, as I mentioned, so that enemies can't later use it against us. This is a really common mistake that I see a lot of Rampart players make, which is that they're careless with where they leave their cover and they let the enemy use that cover against them. So after setting up a new baseline position, I seal off another door into the building, which expands our zone of control. It's going to just be hard to, double kick that door without us noticing. And, again, enemies have to enter the climbing animation after they double kick the door. So it's really just sort of unfavorable, and it's like a lot more work to go through that door instead of finding a different way in. So after I get back, I realize that these enemies that are on the roof can't really attack us, but we can't really attack them. So setting up a stronger position in this specific spot is less valuable because it just gives them more time to plan out how they want to attack us, leaving us to be a known quantity when we really can't do much in reply. I, move forward and look to see if I can surprise them by climbing up on the roof and disrupt their positioning, but my attempt fails, and so I back up, and then I reestablish control inside of the building by placing this piece of cover.
They're coming back up.
Yeah, 72 on the race blue. I get shot from behind, so I attempt to place another piece of cover. If it works, it's great. It improves our control of that side of the room. If it doesn't, then I'm just gonna have to hide in this corner and pray that I'll be able to get off this medkit. Luckily, the cover does go down, and it gives me the space that I need in order to complete the medkit, which then gives us better control of the room. And with a greater margin of error, I feel more comfortable attempting to contest these enemies on the roof. On our way out, you'll notice that I made sure to grab the cover again in case enemies, take our room, especially that one that was just shooting us from behind. And, if contesting these enemies goes poorly, then I can just make that same door play I just made and replace the cover again to reestablish control of that room. After helping secure a knock on horizon, I go back into the room and I restore the wall, like we mentioned, make that door play, and retake the space because I have no armor healing, so I have no margin of error to work with, and I can't really continue to be on the attack. I kind of just holding down this room. My teammate, on the other hand, does have armor, and so they're able to be more proactive. They knock an enemy, we thirst them for their armor. Now that I have armor, I can go back to being more proactive and dealing with the enemies, and I move on to the roof. I need their armor.
And I'll finish them.
Thank you. Up here.
I know.
I find solid damage on an enemy horizon who I'm pretty sure was a solo, and I force them to retreat. I track down a solo wraith from earlier, and that cleans up the area for us. What you hopefully take away from this example is how I used cover to create these areas of known relative safety, even in the super chaotic hot drop, to make dealing with the situation more manageable. The next use case I found myself falling into often with Rampart was extending cover mid-fight. So There are a lot of situations where it's just not possible to choke down an area like we did in the last example, but you can still use your walls to improve or extend existing pieces of cover. If you think about it, a piece of cover with a wall next to it is now 1, bigger, and 2, it now has a little piece of perfect cover on the peak, or at least a partial head glitch if the top half gets shot out. So as I reach this fight and the piece of cover that Pepega is already on, I try to place 3 walls, right? 2 go up on the sides, and 1 that when I try to place in the middle up on the high side doesn't make it up, and the enemies shoot it out. This is kind of an example of how, these recent changes to Rampart really kind of help make her a little bit more of a threat in the middle of the fight, because, the enemies were able to catch like one of the walls going down, but, to catch the other 2, they'd really have to be paying attention. So these 2 pieces of cover go up on both sides. I use the right side to get a decent mid-range shot on the Octane with the Mastiff. Pepega calls out that the enemy Wraith is almost cracked and that the enemy squad is pushing. So this is like a really poor decision to push on their part. So I know that the Octane couldn't have healed yet, and so he's still missing 50 HP, and the Wraith shouldn't push if she's almost cracked, as Pepega called out. So I have a little moment of struggling when dealing with the Octane, but I trade with him before Wraith arrives, and I distract the Wraith sufficiently so that Pepega can clean up. It's a really short example, but hopefully like what you saw there is how those walls, gave us slightly safer peaks from either side, and, gave me an opportunity to land like a more favorable damage exchange up front with the Octane. So the last use case I found myself falling into was using her walls for sieging type attacks when you're trying to push into a building. So placing inward facing cover like locks the door closed and makes any interactions on that door like favorable for our squad now, right? Because the enemy can't open it. We can open it though whenever we want to and shoot through with perfect amped cover, and the enemy can't really shoot us until they shoot out the cover. If they decide to door kick, again, super obvious, and they're staring in the face of amped cover, which they have to shoot out after door kicking in order to hit you. So, once you've placed that like on the wrong side of a door for the enemy, like it's definitely a problem. Also, like placing like the inward facing cover like next to a window, again, makes those interactions really favorable because you've got 200 extra HP to work with the top half of the cover as you, try and find shots on the enemies on the inside. So in this example here, you'll see that I like initially placed inward facing cover, and I was about to set up like another piece of cover, but I hear enemy squads behind me. So I place outward facing cover instead and close the door so that the enemies can't use my cover against me, as we mentioned. So this enemy that's inside the building now, they have no way out because that door is locked, and so they're penned in here with me. If they stop holding that door that they're on closed, then my allies can just open it, shoot through the amp cover, and shoot them in the back. So I have some really questionable reloads and aim in this gunfight, but we're able to secure an easy first knock and slow down the other 2 enemies enough to create a strong 3v2 situation for our squad.
Get his ass, get his ass.
Just double kick him, just double kick him.
Not any reload. Bro, Frosty literally blocked my spray.
Okay, now that you've seen some of the general use cases for Rampart's abilities, let's take a deep dive on our cover, and specifically the scenario where you're placing cover in the middle of the gunfight. So this situation actually has a little bit of a flowchart between you and your opponent. So the first decision point is actually going to be what the opponent decides to do after you place the cover in order to deal with you placing the cover. So if they decide to shoot out the cover, right, that's going to actually cost a few bullets from them, right? It's 45 HP worth of bullets that they're going to have to shoot. So that's time and actually ammunition out of their clip that they're going to have to pay. So that's going to get them that much closer to having to either reload or swap weapons, and that's a few shots that you get to register in them and hopefully, move their HP closer to 0. I'm sure we've all walked away from a couple of fights, like where you're one shot or the enemy's one shot, and so this is the sort of thing that makes a difference. The alternative is if the cover goes up, which is sort of like the next branch of the flowchart, is going to be what the enemy decides to do in response. So if the enemy tries to back off and flank you, you can place another piece of cover, or you can punish them if their pathing is unsafe. If they attempt to push you by jumping over the cover or climbing over it, or just like bum rushing you, right, then you just get free shots on them shooting through the cover, and then even when they enter that climbing or jumping animation, you continue to have free shots on them, and they're just not going to be amped shots. If they decide to shoot through the cover, then you have all the time in the world to shoot back at them, since you should have a line of sight on them if they've got a line of sight on you, or you can just place another piece of cover behind it and be super annoying. You've got lots of options there because that's an option that takes a lot of time and a lot of ammunition out of the enemy. So scenarios where the flowchart isn't as favorable is if the enemy throws a grenade. However, if the enemy was going to throw the grenade in the gunfight, then it was already going to be unfavorable for you, since you would have had to focus on repositioning to avoid taking damage from the grenade. The other unfavorable outcome from this flowchart is if the enemy actually is able to get in on you and get around the cover before you're able to react. And so that's like sort of more of like you keeping track of where the enemy is and being able to like do a little bit of multitasking as you're trying to place the cover and still pay attention to what they're trying to do. In this example, I'm getting chased by the enemy Octane. After he starts shooting at me, I place a piece of cover. In addition to the shots he's already taken, if he shoots out this cover, he'll need to reload or swap his weapon very soon. Instead, he lets the cover go up and I get some free shots through the amped cover. He tries to go around the side of the cover, so I just continue to track him as he moves around on the side. He clearly realizes that a direct hip-to-hip fight is risky after he picks up the shield slot, and so he tries to play my cover. This winds up being super unfavorable for him because he's playing the wrong side of my cover. So the top half of that cover does pretty much nothing to help him, but it, from his perspective, is a complete wall. So you can see here how the fact that I even bothered to try to place the cover helped make that engagement more favorable for me.
Yeah. It's quite unfortunate.
Alright, that wraps up my coverage of Rampart this time around. She's still got some limitations with her pacing issues. There's a general lack of familiarity in the player base with actually having a Rampart on your squad and how to best take advantage of that. And there's also a lack of players, which leads to less innovation and inspiration being available for players that are looking for more creative ways to use her abilities. Finally, she's very susceptible to grenades, crypto, and fuse, all things which are totally reasonable to find over the span of a game. And her highly technical playstyle, introduces a bit of a steeper learning curve for players, that they're going to have to figure out not only how to use her cover, but also like just mechanically, how the cover works and all the little nitty-gritty details that makes, the character unique. Her unconventional playstyle, is definitely a slower one and is not really in line with, I guess, like the prevailing playstyle, which tends towards wanting to play Octane, basically, for most players. And so, she's just not as popular of a character, but I still think she's very viable. So my verdict on the character is that she's probably a sleeper character. She provides a lot of value to her team, and the play rate that she's seeing, I think, is actually way below her potential. I actually think she's even better in ranked. I know all the footage today was actually just unranked footage, which is more related to just a personal thing I'm working on and not necessarily because I don't think the character holds up in ranked. But in ranked, players are going to be a little bit more coordinated and more willing to play defensively and play into and lean into the strengths of the character. So I actually think she's going to get even more mileage in ranked. So really, if you're interested in the character and you find that she gels with you and for some reason your head just works that way, I really suggest that you stick with it because I think there's something there, and that if you master the character, that she's going to provide a lot more value. I would say probably she's kind of in that same vein as crypto, where you really have to start to understand the character and understand the pacing of the character in order to get the most mileage out of them. That's pretty much everything I have for you this time around. Make sure to add to the conversation about Rampart below using the comments and provide any feedback you have, especially with the new format, so that I can improve the videos and I guess just grow as a content creator. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, stay frosty, my friends. Good luck, have fun, and we'll see you next time.